on the vetting of the suspect before he entered the country. We are joined now by Samantha Vinograd, who is a former top counterterrorism official at the Department of Homeland Security under President Biden and was deeply involved in the process for screening and vetting. She is now a national security contributor here at CBS News. Sam, so good to have you with us. Just this morning, the Attorney General said that this suspect entered the U.S. with minimal to little vetting. Is that accurate?
Well, Nancy, I'm happy to talk about the vetting, but at this point, we don't have indications that the horrific tragedy was a result of a vetting failure. Instead, the Attorney General also said this morning it appears the individual was radicalized once here. And let's be clear on what the vetting system is and what it isn't. The vetting system is a system in which an individual's identifiers, their biographic information and biometric information, iris scans, fingerprints, facial images, are run against data sets of information about individuals with ties to terrorism and criminal history. The vetting system is not predictive of whether an individual with no derogatory information is or is not at some point going to become violent. What I can tell you is this, and I was involved in the process. Every Afghan evacuee underwent vetting overseas before they were cleared to be manifested for a flight to the United States. They underwent vetting once they were manifested for a flight at a port of entry before entering the United States. And then Afghan evacuees, including the suspect, were vetted again once in the U.S. by the Biden administration. And this suspect underwent the most comprehensive vetting under the current administration when he applied for asylum. That process would typically involve an interview and a review of social media handles.
Okay, I hear what you're saying, but I want to read to you something that a DOJ Inspector General report laid out earlier this year. They said that when tens of thousands of Afghans arrived at once here in the U.S. at the end of the war, quote, the normal processes required to determine whether individuals posed a threat to national security and public safety were overtaken by the need to immediately evacuate and protect the lives of Afghans, increasing the potential that bad actors could try to exploit the expedited evacuation. Were there vetting corners that had to be cut here?
Well, during the Afghanistan withdrawal and the subsequent period, there are various priorities in place. Certainly, we wanted to help our Afghan partners and bring at-risk Afghans here. But protecting national security and public safety was the foremost priority. And that's why a process was designed that vetted individuals overseas, but it was never intended to be a one and done. It was a multi-stage process with various U.S. government agencies. Afghan evacuees were vetted overseas, biographic and biometric vetting, and then there were other stages of vetting that occurred once individuals were here. So we have to put this vetting process in context.
Let's talk about this suspect specifically. What can you tell us about these so-called zero units that the suspect was a part of in Afghanistan? He worked with the CIA for years, right?
He did, which means that he was vetted by the CIA prior to beginning work in the Zero Unit, which was a paramilitary and intelligence force that partnered with the CIA incredibly closely on some very intense missions. So this suspect reportedly underwent vetting by the CIA for the first time over a decade ago. He had highly specialized training. He did undergo vetting at the time that he started working with the CIA and went on some very complex missions. These units were accused of certain human rights abuses.
And as you pointed out, the Attorney General did say this morning that it's believed that the shooter was radicalized here in the United States. The AP is now reporting that his behavior deteriorated so sharply in recent months that a community advocate was afraid that he was suicidal. Where does this investigation go from here?
Well, this horrific tragedy could be the result of an individual that quickly mobilized to violence without any ties to foreign terrorism. And as we have discussed in other cases, trying to find lone actors before they initiate an attack is harder than trying to find a needle in a haystack. That work, trying to find a lone actor who's mobilizing to violence quickly, involves intelligence, law enforcement, and counterterrorism officials here in the U.S., not vetting experts, but here in the U.S. at all levels of government, federal, state, and local, to try to find signs that an individual is mobilizing to violence and try to get them help before they actually initiate an attack.
When the president says that he wants to have everyone who came in here to the United States from Afghanistan, about 90,000 people, rescreened, re-examined, How would that work? And does DHS have the resources to do that?
Well, to be very clear, DHS is not the only entity involved in vetting. Various members of the counterterrorism, law enforcement, and intelligence community perform vetting. I do have questions about the number of resources available to engage in that exercise just based upon resource constraints within the federal government, but it is possible. It will take time. But to be clear, Afghan evacuees have been re-vetted since coming to the United States. They were revetted under the Biden administration, and then as they have adjusted their status to asylum or other things, they had to go through already other vetting processes.
You know, you talk about this suspect and trying to find signs that he was radicalized. How will investigators go about doing that?
Well, investigators are certainly already speaking to individuals that knew the suspect, friends, family, co-workers, the organizations that help support him in the community. And we don't yet know, Nancy, whether this individual was known to law enforcement in his community. I think we'll learn that in the coming days.
Great insight. Sam Vinograd,
Thanks,
CBS News contributor, thank you so much.